Hello, everybody, and welcome to WonkComms. Today's topic is think tank events in the wake of the pandemic, a practical approach. And we love practical approach WonkComms. I think they're the most useful things ever. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and share my screen, go through a little bit of housekeeping, and then hand over to our speakers. So bear with me, sharing my screen again. And here we go. Brilliant. So yes, so today's topic is think tank events in the wake of the pandemic. It's a practical approach. This has been organized by WonkComms in partnership with Soapbox. Back in the early days of these events, we used to actually have them as a breakfast, and we called them WonkComms Breakfast Club. We were all in person back then. We held them in London or Washington, DC. Obviously, now we're all online. Like the panelists today, we've decided to make a virtue out of this necessity. So we've transformed this into a series of transatlantic events, sharing perspectives from the US, UK, and Europe. And we have panelists today from Brussels and DC, and a very, very wide range of wonks in the audience from everywhere in between. Let me change my slide. Here we go. One thing to say, we are recording this session. We will be sharing it online afterwards, but only the speakers' faces will be visible. We're not publishing a list of attendees or anything like that. It's worth noting, this has actually been our most popular WonkComms Zoom event that we have hosted thus far. We actually even had to upgrade our Zoom account to accommodate everyone who's here today. So thank you very, very much for signing up. I think this is obviously something we're all going through, and at least we can now all go through it together. On with the show. No, the other way. Okay, so our speakers today are absolutely wonderful. We have Jasper, who's Assistant Director of Communications Operations at Atlantic Council, and we have Katja, who's the Events and Governance Manager at Bruegel. WonkComms is a community of practice for people who've been working in think tank and policy research communications, just like Jasper and Katja and you and me. We've been active for about 8 years now. I'm, by the way, Johanna Schwartz. I'm a partner at Soapbox. I'm also the filmmaker in residence, producer of videos, producer of animations. Soapbox was founded 12 years ago, and we aim to be the design and digital agency for think tanks and policy research organizations. If you're interested in what we do, please, socials, website, you know the score. So I'm very pleased to present to you Jasper and Katja. They're both brilliant. I highly recommend you follow them on social media and the organizations they work for. All the information is there on your screen. They're going to share their experiences with online events over the past year, what they've learned, how their thinking has changed, because certainly how we did it in March 2020 versus March 2021, and now even May 21 has changed drastically. And then the rest of the time, we're going to be in conversation. So before I hand over, a few housekeeping things. This session is something we're very much looking forward to your input, basically. So we'd like you to take part in the conversation. There is a Q&A and a chat button at the bottom of your screen. Please use the chat to introduce yourself now. Let us know who you are and that you're here. Ideas, brainstorms, questions, everything. I'll be monitoring this throughout the session, and then I'll sort of pick a few questions to ask at the end, or a lot of questions to ask at the end. One thing that was just pointed out to me, at the bottom of the chat function, it says all panelists. If you can actually view all panelists plus attendees, then you can actually see what everyone is posting, which is really, really good. We encourage you to tweet during this using the hashtag WonkComms. Okay, so that's it from me. I'm going to stop sharing now. Goodbye. Goodbye. And I'm going to hand over to Katja, who won the coin toss that we had last week. So she gets to go first. I don't know if it's won or lost. But Katja, over to you. I'm going to stop talking. It's all you. There we go.
Thank you very much, Johanna. Yeah, it was a one coin toss. It does feel like I lost a bit now, but okay, I'm going for it. So first of all, thank you very much to WonkComms and Soapbox for the invitation today, and also thank you to all the participants who have joined us for the talk. I'm really looking forward to engaging with you in a conversation. So after the initial presentations. So my name is Katja. I work at Bruegel. It's a Brussels-based economics think tank. So that means that we mostly delve into topics such as, macroeconomics, digital research, as of recently, future of work, of course, climate and energy, and financial regulation. So those have been our kind of core, 5 core research fields over the years. And yeah, our mission is improving economic policy. So we try and do research that's aimed at policymakers to make things better for all of us. So what I'm going to do today is basically talk about the last year and 3 months and how it all went for us in terms of event management. Just a second, sorry. Okay. Voilà. So what I have in my presentation is kind of 4 main chapters. So I'm going to go through a timeline of the past 13 months, 14 months, and what the shapes and sizes have our online events taken and why they've taken those new forms, what new formats and channels we've been forced to discover and how it worked out. Overall, how this has been a learning curve. And finally, the final slide will be a simple 3-ingredient recipe on how to make a good online event. So it's important to mention that, I didn't put that in the slide, so I'm going to say it right now. On average, Bruegel does about 80 to 90 events per year. Roughly 90% of them are public events, so freely available because Bruegel considers itself a public good. And that number actually hasn't changed with the online events. So at the beginning, we did feel like it might rise, but throughout the year, it's kind of evened out since during the summer break, people are less keen to be stuck to the screen as much. So how it was to adapt to online-only events. So in the past, while the world was not so digital, we mostly focused on on-site participation. We did live stream our events, but it wasn't our primary focus. Since we are based in Brussels, our primary focus has always been to start dialogues here in the heart of Europe, and communicate directly to the policymakers. So live stream was just this additional cute thing that you put in your report at the end of the year. However, when the pandemic hit us, Livestream basically became the event. But it was an important thing to have had at the moment because we had an existing event suite and we had a trained staff who already was familiar enough with the equipment and with the different online platforms. This is a small snapshot of our in-house event suite, and this is kind of this DJ mixer board that we use and a number of cameras and computers. So basically when the pandemic hit, I remember already on the third day of working from home, we already had our first public online event with I think it was Commissioner Breton or Commissioner Gentiloni, I'm not sure anymore. At the beginning, we went about it in the most straightforward way. So directly from Zoom, I think most of you have figured it out by now that if you're hosting a Zoom call, there are these 3 dots in the right-hand side corner. If you click on it, it offers you to live stream the conversation somewhere. So this is how we did it. And at the beginning, very straightforward. It was very basic. The primary focus of that was to get the widest possible outreach. We completely lost focus of the networking aspect that we had in the past, and it was more about spreading the knowledge and the debates and also doing partnerships. We kind of that was also an interesting stroke of luck there, because also previous to the lockdown, we had been planning a partnership with the Financial Times. So when the COVID crisis started, we kept the same partnership and pretty much the same key figures. So a number of European commissioners and the journalists from the FT, but this time pretty much all the topics were about COVID and COVID crisis. So I think that was a good, strong start to have, basically, because we immediately showed to the public that that we are capable of bringing the key speakers to deal with these serious issues. Then in the second phase, when when the measures were a bit less strict, we did some hybrid events in our event suite that I earlier showed, and also some moving live streams, which I'm going to talk about more, and explored new formats. So for example, this was in September. The left-hand side picture is from our annual meetings, where we had over 65 speakers in 16 sessions across 3 days. During those 3 days, all of our team aged for about 5 years. But overall, the events were a big success because we managed to get a global audience and also global speakers. We had 2 Nobel Prize winners, a bunch of commissioners and ministers and whatnot. And the right-hand side picture is another hybrid event with our director and the president of the European Council, Jacques Michel. So that kind of the second lockdown well, it wasn't a lockdown, the second phase, the kind of this Olympic Games break between the lockdowns was marked by hybrid events, and we tried to make use of, getting the right people in the studio, but still also connecting to the people outside. And on top of that, now I'm going to come back to that. On top of that, in the summer of 2020, we had a small project called Reopening, where we had a three-man team do a little Euro trip and basically talk to people, to real actual people from the countries that have been shut down for 3 months on how they experienced the lockdown and the reopening of the borders. Content-wise, yeah, it was a very beautiful project to undertake. Practically speaking, it was really interesting. So it was basically fun to watch how all you need is a good quality microphone, an iPhone, a recorder, and off you go. We live streamed 2 or 3 events in this way. One of them was live streamed from a gas station in Luxembourg. So we will put our creative heads together there and try to come up with something that's going to be even more interactive, even more dynamic, combining the in-person encounters as much as it's possible with the global outreach. And then finally, when the second lockdown, so in the autumn of last year and throughout the winter of last year and this year, we had to go back to working from home. The cases in Belgium at the time when it was announced were around 27,000 per day. So all going to the offices was completely banned. So we had to again readapt to that. But we also didn't want to go to that basic, live streaming from Zoom. So what we did is, with the help of a technician, we kind of put together this kind of at-home, very simplified live stream system that I like to call moonshine live stream, because it's just done at home. So something that for which we would normally use, 3 cameras, 5 computers, bunch of these signal converting boxes. Now it's down to 2 computers, 1 signal converting box, and yeah, just 1 very good quality pair of headphones. That's me without makeup. I didn't think this through, so I'll just move on. So that's pretty much the phases that we've been going through. What we are looking at now that the measures are loosening and the cases are thankfully going down and lots of people are getting vaccinated, we are optimistic about going back to the office. But we're facing a very clear reality that it is going to have to be a hybrid event. So whatever we did in this kind of this virtual cloud and the global outreach, we will want to keep that, but basically reintroduce again this element of networking and of getting people to talk to each other. During the lockdown phases, when it was completely impossible to organize our typical networking sessions, what we did instead to compensate is to amp a bit the number of closed-door events that we have for people so they can talk to each other. So it's not just the events where people are watching a live stream or a lecture and or something like that. It's also important to mention all the many channels that we have explored. We have recently started also doing kind of small conversation events on Clubhouse. I understand that it's now come to Androids as well, not just to iPhones. So that's fun. So we do have a channel there called The Sound of Economics. Feel free to give it a follow. So what we've done recently, we've had 2 events already that are, so they are primarily held in Clubhouse, but they're also live streamed on our website and other social media channels, so that people can either speak directly to the speakers in the Clubhouse room, or they can listen to the whole interaction as if it were a radio show, basically, through our other channels. And also over the last 14 months, we've been live streaming simultaneously on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and as of recently, finally LinkedIn. We've been wooing that one for such a long time, so hard to get, but now we're there as well. And yeah, we observe how people interact on them. So they're, even though they're all social media channels, they're very different animals and people use them in different ways. And it's very informative and useful that they all have their own analytic systems that you then have to gauge and understand and make sense out of the whole thing. And as for the equipment, it's always important to have a strong computer. Not any computer can take live streaming. If there are video gamers among you, you will know what it means. We've had our custom made for that purpose. It's important whichever platform you use. We in particular use Vimeo, but I've heard of others, and we did use Wirecast in the past. It's important that they're flexible in a way that you can experiment with different things. And also that they have good analytics tracking. Another important thing is good lighting. I always ask speakers to join earlier so I can check their faces, and even more importantly, a good microphone. So we've noticed that people are, from anecdotal evidence, people are likely even to put their computer on the side or even join through their phones and kind of treat the event as if it were a podcast. So sound kind of trumps image, basically, when it comes to online events. And the final point in this learning curve is that it's important to constantly try and keep up. I know it's annoying because there's so much out there and new things are coming every day, but yeah, it's a reality we weren't counting on, and it's important basically to look ahead and see what's coming next so you can already prepare for it. We were lucky last year that we had been prepared for it because we were live streaming before. So, it's important not to count on that luck, but just be grateful it happened and then over prepare for the next thing that's coming. And that brings me kind of to what is the summary, what is the recipe for a good online event. So my first instruction would really be just to hire an engineer. I wouldn't have known a year and a half ago, I knew about a lot fewer both digital and physical products than I do today. And I would be really dishonest to tell it that it came as, as personal inspiration to me. It didn't. It was thanks to a really kind, patient, and creative tech engineer that helped us put all these different things together. And if you're aiming for something good, it's better to entrust that work with someone who knows what is out there that you may not even be able to imagine. And also, a good engineer will always respect budget limitations. And I'm sure that nowadays there's basically something for every niche in that sense. The second point or the second ingredient of a good online event, and honestly, I think I should have actually put this one first. So the best marketing is the product itself. At the end of the day, it's all about the content. Having a good engineer is nice, okay, but are they a Nobel Peace Prize winner, or can they talk about non-performing loans? I know it's as exciting as it sounds. It's true, because in our annual meetings, we had, as I said, 2 Nobel Prize winners, and all the issues that Bruegel tackles are usually very topical, very, high profile economics, stuff that people are genuinely interested in. And ultimately, at the end of the day, regardless of the light tricks and all the cables that you will plug into an event, people are there in order to listen to and participate in a meaningful conversation. So having good speakers, a well-researched topic, and then afterwards a recording of that good conversation is ultimately the best product, regardless of all the gimmicks and gadgets that you can get. So that would my basically strongest advice is for that to be the starting point. Just organize a good event and everything else will fall into place. I'm saying that because over the past 14 months, I've noticed that throughout all of these different phases, be it that we are live streaming from Zoom, from the European Council, from the gas station in Luxembourg, no matter where it is, our average watch time is always very high. Just this week on Tuesday, I think we live streamed an event that was 90 minutes long, but the average watch time was 58 minutes, almost an hour. That means that basically roughly 85% of the audience stayed for the entire 90 minutes, and then a minor percentage dropped off at some point because I guess they were distracted by something else because internet. So I think that's something, you know, that speaks for itself. And yeah, those people who stuck around for the 90 minutes, they didn't stick around because I was releasing cutesy overlays and, you know, graphics. They stayed for the conversation. And that brings me to my last point. How I know that we had such good average watch time, because I use a platform that measures for that. So it's really, really important to, after each event or maybe after a series of events, that the team gets together and looks at the analytics across different platforms, but especially on the main platform, which is used for the live streaming, and then learn from them. It's when you diagnose the problems or when you acknowledge what went right, you kind of get a solid stepping stone to go further from and seek new inspiration. It is thanks to analytics that we've noticed that Monday is not a good day for event. Lunchtime is the best hour. Never organize event outside working hours. No matter how passionate anyone is about non-performing loans, they're not going to sacrifice their dinner time for it. Length of the event is also very important, and also it's important how and where we promote it. You know, some events will have, you know, transatlantic audience. Obviously, we need to schedule promotion for that, you know, respecting the time zones and stuff like that. So with that, I will conclude my speech. So thank you very much for listening. I hope this was useful. If I missed anything, I'm very happy to talk about it later in the questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Katja. I am fascinated that you are having events on Clubhouse. Can't quite get my head around Clubhouse, actually. But that's so interesting. And I'm 100% going to follow the sound of economics in Clubhouse and see what you're doing on there. You're the first person that I've heard in this sphere, in this sector, talking about doing events on Clubhouse. I think that's really cool. Okay, so Jasper, over to you. Everybody, this is Jasper, and take it away.
Thank you, Johanna. Thank you so much for the invite to speak at this WonkComms webinar. It's really a pleasure. I'm actually also really glad that I lost the coin toss in the middle of your presentation. The VP's motorcade just passed outside of my house, so it would have been about 2 minutes of sirens. You know, as we've, I'm sure, all experienced, there are a lot of unpredictable things that can happen during events. Like Katja, I'm going to share my screen here real quick. Quick PowerPoint to share with all of you. All right. And Johanna, can you give me a quick nod, please? If you can see that, great. All right, so my name is Jasper Gilardi. I'm the Assistant Director of Communications Operations at the Atlantic Council. Let's see, my keyboard is just reconnecting here. What is the Atlantic Council? Well, we're a foreign policy think tank based in Washington, D.C., as am I. We're made up of 14 programs and centers with really a global focus, and they really run the gamut from our Africa Center, which of course focuses on African affairs, to our Digital Forensic Research Lab, which focuses on global disinformation trends, research, reporting, all of that. Now, like a lot of other think tanks, we focus on producing blogs, reports, but we're also known around town for our events, and events were really, really a huge part of what we do as an organization. And in 2019, before the pandemic, we actually hosted 227 public events. So really the adjustment to the pandemic period, which of course started for us in March when we all had to start working remotely, was a really major transformational step for us as an organization. We really had to adapt to the new times. So to speak about our approach here, I'll really break it down into two different sort of engagement strategies, one with our core audiences and one about how we tried to engage with our expanding the audiences beyond the core. So we really took on 3 new platforms, of course, Zoom for our webinars, Switchboard for multi-streaming, and Snapstream for live clipping. And I'll get into those 3 right now. So we actually chose Zoom for our webinars from the get-go, mostly because it was the existing and most popular infrastructure out there. But this really also provided an added benefit in that our speakers, our partners, were already somewhat familiar with the platform, and that really helped us, get off the ground quickly and host our first event the week after we went remote. But we also wanted to foster that direct feeling of a direct connection to the event, that X factor that you don't really get when you're watching, say, YouTube live stream, and take advantage of Zoom's interactive functions, the Q&A functions that Johanna outlined. But beyond that, we really had to change our internal processes as well. So a bit like Katja mentioned, we've been running test calls ahead of each of our events. Our event coordinators, who are ordinarily running our in-person events, had to quickly adapt and set up test calls with each and every single one of our speakers ahead of our events, just to verify that framing was well done, our lighting was good, we were going to get the best event possible, and we were trying to keep the framing between speakers as consistent as possible as well, something a bit like this, actually. But beyond that too, we also found that the green rooms for Zoom webinars were a really, really powerful tool for us to engage with our partners and our friends of the organization. So we were really able to invite people in, do our last minute AV checks, do a quick run of show with the speakers, and then oftentimes that really turned into a great bit of policy talk, idle chit chat. That was a really fun way to keep engaged with the people in our orbit. But we also wanted to extend our audiences, and the first tool that we took on to do this was a platform called Switchboard. And really all Switchboard is an RTMP routing tool. It receives a feed on one end and pushes it out to social media on another. It can send out feeds to as many social media platforms as you'd like. We focused our multi-streaming on Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. And though we had previous live streaming capabilities to YouTube with our events, this was a real step up, and it was something that we jumped on early in the pandemic. This was also a tool we could use to stream directly to our partners and speakers accounts. This became a really, really great selling point for our events too. And you can see here on the side of the screen here, a quick screenshot of what those at least in this case, a Periscope live stream looked like on Twitter from an event this week. It's now become such a critical part of our processes around our events that we actually have a little over 30 staffers now trained up on how to live stream their events through Switchboard. And we've been really, really happy with the results. Now, the other tool we actually had already in our back pocket, but we really turned to it a lot more once we went virtual, was a tool called Snapstream. And really it's a way that it's a tool that's allowed us to live clip our video or our events as they're happening. So while the event is going live, we've got a social media manager who's taking clips of highlights and retweeting them out with a bit of context. It really allowed us to cover our events and create really, really shareable, retweetable content on the fly. And of course, this stuff is really viral ready. So while we might get, say a few thousand viewers on the live stream, sometimes these tweeted clips can do much better, and because they're shorter and can get really a lot more shares and retweets. But of course, we wanted to take our events to the next level. We didn't just want to survive through the pandemic. And we found that these were actually a really huge opportunity. These virtual events were a huge opportunity to engage with speakers from around the world, as I suppose we're doing right now. And that, scheduling geography, these weren't limitations on who we could get to speak at the council. So the question really became, well, if we're all working remotely, who can we get to speak at the council? So really early on, we jumped on starting up a premier event series for newsmaking speakers. We called it Atlantic Council Front Page because the speakers themselves would make the front page with their comments. And this is something we kicked off very, very early on in the pandemic. I think we started with the Colombian president, Iván Duque, soon after Juan Guaidó, and then we hosted others like Hillary Clinton, Jens Stoltenberg, amongst plenty of others. I think we've hosted about 30 front page events at this point. But of course, a premier event series requires a boost in production quality. And we actually hired Soapbox to produce a series of animated video assets that we could adapt. Yes, thank you, Johanna. It was a terrific job you guys did on those. A series of animated video assets that we could adapt for each of these front page events, adding speakers' names, a little slideshow, and new video from past front page events, just to amp up the production quality. We really didn't want to host another Zoom webinar. On top of that, we also started using Wirecast as well as Blackmagic Atom video switchers. And because we had some core speakers, our president and CEO, for example, Fred Kemp, we really wanted to boost the production quality in his home and in his office as well. So we invested in high-end cameras, daylight balanced LEDs, and high quality microphones to really boost the production quality on that level as well. And because screen sharing video so often doesn't work great on Zoom, I've shared a few screenshots here of what that's looked like. Here's our president and CEO in his office, Fred Kemp. And you can see how we've amped up the production value for the series. If this weren't a screenshot, you'd be able to see that this is actually an animated backdrop, and we're able to switch between screens. This is actually a front page event we hosted just this week with the US ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas Greenfield, with our new Africa Center director, Rami Yad. Again, we can switch between views, highlight new speakers, pull them up full screen if needed as well. But what are the results of all this? Well, in 2019, as I mentioned, we hosted 227 events. In 2020, we boosted that number to 420. It was a pretty crazy feat from the AV team, the events team, and some days we were hosting 5 or 6 events. Actually, just this morning before this event started, we hosted 2, one on Belarus and another on wind power with a European organization. But because of these new tools, we were also really able to boost our viewership. So in 2019, we had 28,000 attendees, and I use the word attendees because this included people watching on YouTube as well as those that appeared in person. But because of Switchboard, we were able to boost our event viewership in 2020 to 1.9 million viewers, which we're really, really, really happy about. And a little bit about the platform breakdown here. We had about equal portions of viewers on Twitter and Facebook, some more on YouTube, and then about equal portions of viewers on LinkedIn and Zoom. Now, the thing about these live streams, it's a bit of a fickle process, as I'm sure Katja can attest to as well. And sometimes they do well with a few thousand viewers. Sometimes they do astronomically well. We hosted a front page event with the Prime Minister of Singapore, and his live stream on Facebook got something like 300,000 viewers. We were all shocked and incredibly happy, but it was just came out of nowhere. We were all surprised. But of course, we also host conferences, and every year we previously, before the pandemic, hosted an annual conference in Abu Dhabi. Of course, when the pandemic hit, we had other conferences lined up, but had to cancel those early on because we weren't quite ready to pull something like that off. Now, this year in 2021, we hosted the Global Energy Forum in Abu Dhabi for the first time virtually, kind of bringing in speakers and MCs from all over the world. And just last month, we actually hosted the first EU-US Future Forum in partnership with the EU delegation of the US here in Washington, DC. And I'll talk a bit about both conferences, but I'll mostly focus on our work with the EU-US Future Forum, because I think we learned a lot between the 2 conferences. But really, from the get-go, we were confronted with this question of how do we make a conference feel like a conference? How do we get that interaction between the speakers and the audience members, between each other? It's a tough thing to do when we're all remote. So we took on a platform called Socio so that we could facilitate that interaction online. And then we really wanted to make sure that the product looked very cohesive. And so again, we turned to Soapbox for both of these conferences to produce essentially a visual style for the conference, as well as a set of video assets, templates really for the conference, to really bring the whole thing together. We wanted our audience members to whenever they were looking at anything from the conference, be it promotion or the stuff appearing on screen, we wanted them to know that they were watching the EU-US Future Forum. So these assets included static graphics, an animated intro video, name straps, transitions, on-screen elements, on-stage elements, whole series of templates that we were then able to build out with our staff on the Atlantic Council side. Now, we also opted to essentially host nonstop programming through the conferences, and this was a pretty crazy challenge for the Global Energy Forum. We had staff up at like 2 a.m. starting the next day's programming, and then others starting at 8 a.m. It was a pretty funny shift schedule. And for both conferences, we wanted to bring the whole thing together with an in-person studio main stage that kind of served as a touchstone for the conference to both boost the production quality, but also to serve as something to bring everybody back together. And here's what that, well, actually, here's what the screens look like for this latest US Future Forum. We drew on a lot of our experiences around front page. We added animated video backdrops, which I suppose with this white background, it's kind of hard to tell, but we had this kind of motif from Soapbox with these floating U's as this sort of common denominator between the EU and US. And we applied that, well, Soapbox applied that all over the place, and we adapted it for these video assets. As you can see here, we had a panel with a Politico reporter as a moderator, a few speakers, and we were able to adapt this video window day by day with some color variation, as well as the speakers. Here we've got a panel with Secretary Madeleine Albright as well. I think that was on day one of the conference. Now, as yes, we also had brought this branding into our name straps and other video assets. So you can see that same sort of U motif here at the bottom of the screen. And after we got the templates from Soapbox, we jumped on creating one of these for each and every single speaker for the conference. So it was sort of a two-step process of design and then production, and then working with the production company we hired to do the video switching and the production for the conference, a company here in the DC area. Now, at the same time, we took all of those static graphics that we got from Soapbox, and we turned them all into a studio inside the Atlantic Council offices. We weren't really using it for anything else because we were all still working remotely. So we hired a company to take those Photoshop files and turn them into this printed studio in our offices that we could use for the conference. And this is what that studio looked like from afar. Here we've got our Europe Center director, Benjamin Haddad, moderating a panel. And as you can see, we had a variety of spots where we could bring in MCs and a variety of cameras, teleprompters, everything set up so that we could use this studio as that touchstone for the conference. After every panel ended, we would have MCs, adding a bit of commentary, introducing the next panel, and handing it off to the moderators. And here we've got a couple of shots. One of my colleague, Denise Frosthuber, introducing the next panel, and then another of Denise and our VP, Damon Wilson, introducing another panel by bringing in the moderator on one of the on-studio screens, which really helped amp up the production quality for the event, for the conference. But with that, thank you so much for joining. Please feel free to get in touch. There's my email. And just to leave you with one quick thought too on what we've learned from the past year is and I know maybe Katja can echo this, but none of the software, the tools we're using have really been built for purpose of how we're using them. Zoom webinars, it's great for all the things it can do, but it's also it totally hamstrings us on a number of other features. And I wish I could show you the setup from our AV manager's office to what that looks like. He's got like 8 computers set up, a massive video switcher, another computer dedicated to streaming. It's been a real challenge, a gratifying one, but it's been a really massive learning process for our team, and we're looking forward to seeing how we bring all of that together once we go back into the offices in September as well. So with that, thank you so much for listening. Back to you, Johanna.
Amazing, Jasper. Thank you so much. And I think that's a really good point, that all of the tools and the products that have been mentioned here, and of course there are others as well, none of them are exactly set up to do what we want them to do. So, we're all really in a situation now where we're using little bits of this and little bits of that to try to effectively do what it is that we want to do. So it's like the early days of filmmaking. And I do kind of like that DIY sort of way of going about things, and all the best films are made in that DIY style. So I think that all the events should benefit from that. Having said that, it'd be nice to have some tools that actually worked. So a lot of people are interested in these tools. And what's been really great that both of you have talked about the really big events and also the sort of smaller events, like live streaming from a gas station. Was it Luxembourg? I think it's really, really cool. And it would be great for you both to speak about, for think tanks that have smaller budgets, How do they upscale from just effectively what we're doing today, which is a Zoom webinar? Do you need to invest in technology? Do you need to invest in an engineer? Can you use a freelancer? Can that freelancer be in a different location geographically to you and you work remotely with the engineer? You know, what have you found versus, and certainly within the software and the tools, what works better when you're doing a small event versus when you're doing a really big event? Or do you find that the same works for both? So Katja, why don't you answer that first?
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you. Yeah, that's actually a very good question, because we're not that big of a think tank. We've been lucky to have the studio from the get-go, but normally speaking, we don't have a big flashy budget either. So my advice would be, it would still be to hire an engineer. I'm so sorry, but I'm sure that you can find a friend, or a friend of a friend who's also, or even like a very experienced gamer. Honestly, these guys know what's out there. Because it's true that there's, I think now, if you have a spectrum of basically of different solutions that are more or less budget friendly, you can find all of them. You can find microphones that range from 50 euros to 5,000 euros, and there's usually a reason for that, but I think even the ones for 200 will pretty much do the same job as the one for 5K, but those guys, so I don't know, managed to sell it somehow. So yeah, I would start with the basics, because what you need is a good microphone and a flexible online platform for live streaming. And the thing is, with this deluge of online events that have taken over the last year, there's a lot of competition among these guys. So things are not only getting better, but they're also getting cheaper, because they want to stay competitive amongst each other. So what I would do, yeah, is for a think tank with a small budget, I would look into at least having, for starters, just, I don't know, a one-time 2-hour consultation with a sound engineer. And then take it from there, and then maybe independently do some research on the live streaming platforms. So some that I mentioned are Vimeo, Wirecast, Riverside, Zoom itself. So yeah, just do some basic research with those two, and then take it from there.
And what about partnerships? Because you said you had a partnership with the FT. How did that work? Did you guys handle that broadcast, as it were, or did the FT handle that broadcast and then you just helped to organize it? How did that work? And is that perhaps an option for a think tank that doesn't have in-house people?
In our experience, partnerships are basically best to amp up promotion and also to enhance the content. The kind of the good outcome out of that partnership is that we got FT journalists to moderate the conversation. So that's the huge part of it, and that also drew audiences. But we hosted the live streams ourselves. So I think partner for any small organization or individual that's only starting to break into a market and trying to kind of carve out their niche for the audience, I think partnerships are a good way, to basically piggyback on somebody's reputation. Now, I wouldn't, I don't want to walk the rope here and guess who's piggybacking on whom between Bruegel and FT. I think it depends on the audience. I think it was a kind of a mutually useful cooperation.
Okay, and Jasper, what about you? What do you think about all of these tools? What works for small events? Versus what works for big conferences? What do you think?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think the first thing to dive into is how can you improve the visual quality of the tools that you've got on hand. Right now, I'm set up in front of a big curtain, which acts as a really, really nice softbox, and maybe speak with some of your core speakers, see if they've got a digital camera at their house. A lot of camera companies are actually now creating webcam support software. At least for our key speakers, we actually turned to Fujifilm cameras, both because it's what we had on hand, but it was also their software worked incredibly well to connect to Zoom and other platforms. So sometimes those tools are already readily available from some of your speakers. On top of that, I would also take a look at a platform called Switcher Studio. This is different from Switchboard, but it's a really great way that you can amp up the production quality of your events, and you actually run all of the live video switching off of an iPad. I think you can, at the moment, bring in up to 5 speakers in video chat. You can preload video, you can add slides, you can add lower thirds, all within the app. I've got an iPad set up at my desk actually for doing exactly this, not necessarily for our events, because it doesn't actually fit all of our needs, especially around our green rooms. But I think for something like $30 a month, you can do most of what you would need to do with, say, a Wirecast or another piece of software, but very simply on an iPad. It's a fun thing to play around with as well. And I think a platform like Switchboard, again, cheap prices month to month, but that can really boost your visibility as well.
And also OBS Studios is free, right?
It is. It's a bit tricky to use in our experience, so we turn to Wirecast for a lot of that, but it's definitely out there, and it is free. Yeah. It's a bit tougher to make a consistent product, but.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's a sort of beg, borrow, and steal situation. Jeff from the WHO had a great question, which was on my list to ask as well. There's the next question. So thank you, Jeff. You read my mind. All of these events that both of you have hosted have looked amazing, but what could, you know what I'm going to ask, what has gone wrong? What could go wrong and what has gone wrong? What is the worst that could happen? Jasper, do you want to go first?
Oh, let's see. All of this video is getting routed through a number of different channels, and when somebody forgets to hit a button somewhere, all of a sudden your viewers are not able to hear what's going on. They're not able to see what's going on, and that's definitely happened a couple times to us, where either video got routed to the wrong YouTube live stream, or something happened and we got a really horrible echo in the middle of the event, and in trying to solve it, we had problems where nobody could actually hear the event at all, which was a pretty big surprise. But yeah, no, it's very easy for things to go wrong, and so a lot of the time, because we're using this hodgepodge of platforms, it's felt like a total high wire act and very easy to fall.
What about you, Katja?
Yes, I have the exact same experience, because it's a patchwork of different platforms. Basically, the worst thing that can happen is that the internet going down in the middle of the live stream. Or just recently, I think the biggest problem that I had that I don't know, the computer contracted a bug and it wouldn't connect to the internet, and it started glitching in the middle of the event. So basically I had to switch to Wi-Fi, tell the speakers to hold 5 minutes, reboot the computer, then kind of recreate the entire live stream with all of its destinations, and then notify the entire audience that they can rejoin back. Sorry for the 5-minute break and stuff like that. So basically, I guess the mistake to avoid is to get comfortable and never double check. So always double check everything, and have a multiple person team basically on standby to fix. Because so in most of these situations, it's just me, maybe occasionally another person live streaming, but there's at least 4 people online just kind of ready, supervising the Twitter, the Slido for the questions, YouTube, everything. So in case something goes wrong, we just immediately kind of split duties. And like, okay, you fix this, you notify the audience, I'll reboot the computer, and then let's just get back on that course. So yeah, basically always that's the thing that I would avoid. Don't get comfortable.
And I guess the ultimate thing that could also go wrong is that you guys have done everything right. You've done your double checks. All the engineers are on it, but something happens on the speaker end, and their internet goes down, or they don't show up, or there's something goes wrong there. So I mean, I think there's about 1 million things that go wrong. But have you found that kind of people don't care, or have you found that people get quite upset about it?
I found that people are they can relate. I mean, we all, most of us in this sector spend most of our working hours online. We all know what it's like sometimes when it's beyond your power. But for that kind of troubleshoot, and I think that relates also to one of the other questions that I saw on the chat about Clubhouse. it's important to have a good chair. So if a speaker drops out, chair can step in, kind of be charming about it, remind people what was said and what the speaker was going to say as we are waiting for them to come back, stuff like that. Similarly to, I saw somebody saw the chaotic environment of Clubhouse. Well, we kind of did have Clubhouse in the past when we had our in-house events, when we had 80 people in the audience and somebody raised their hand. You don't know what they're going to ask. It's going to be one of those questions, let me talk for 5 minutes. So it's always down to having a really good, strong moderator. And yeah, all of Bruegel's moderators are senior researchers who are, well versed in the topic. So yeah, they handle the conversation.
I went to unmute. I think that's a really, really strong point. I'll try to be a strong chair here. So the next question is about impact. So we all know that the main obvious benefit of doing hybrid or online events is that you can include more people, and you can include people across many different time zones, and people don't have to travel. But in terms of audience engagement, versus a live event versus a hybrid and online event, have you found any advantages with the audience engagement because everybody is online? I don't know, Katja, Jasper?
Sure, same story as getting our speakers they're working with flexible schedules, working remotely. They don't have to be in say DC for one of our events. Audience members, it's the same story. They don't have to make it down to our offices for a live event, or remember to tune in for a live webinar on YouTube. They get invites via email and calendar invites through there as well. So we've really set them up to be able to tune into the event when it's happening.
And then during the event, in terms of fostering discussion, I guess that's what I mean more. So how do you replace that sort of tea break in the middle of a conference online?
I think it goes back to what Katja was saying about having a really great chair to ensure that those reminders are going out to the audience, saying make sure to engage with this hashtag as you did at the beginning of this event, but also remind people to go back and use the Q&A functions. And specifically for our conference, we were using a platform called Socio to bring everybody together on this web application, but it was such a critical thing for our MCs to do those same reminders through the Socio app, and for us to really get our core staff engaged on there as well, so that we could really provide some value with the engagement on there. So it was really, I suppose, about developing that critical mass on the conference app, so that people could really come back and see the value in the chat, the Q&A function there as well.
Yeah, really good. What about you guys?
Yeah, it's similar for us. We've introduced, so when we live stream our public events, we take questions from the platform called Slido. We opted for that because we found it's more democratic, because not everyone uses Twitter, not everyone uses Facebook. And yeah, so we went basically for a fifth platform for that. And Slido is cool because it allows you to upvote questions, and then the most popular ones come up on top. And again, the moderator is the responsible one to, weave in as many questions as they like into the conversation and pick the best ones to ask. So that has been that way of engaging on the public events. But I have to say that basically the road we've taken is to kind of split those, and instead of trying to recreate the tea breaks in the public events, simply compensate by organizing even more closer events. And those are smaller online meetings. Yeah, just a video call with a limited hand-picked number of people where they engage in a really deep discussions that they would normally have in person in our offices, as a kind of as a way of compensating.
And have you found with the analytics that people have been tending to engage more with live streams on this platform versus this platform, like YouTube versus LinkedIn, or what do the analytics tell you about how people are engaging and where they like to engage the most? This is a question from John from Soapbox.
Well, this is speaking for a perspective of an economics think tank, so it won't apply for everyone. The thing is about the social media channels is they have their own demographics in a way. A very senior person who is very high level working for, I don't know, some European institution is not likely to follow an event on Facebook and, put a hug smiley or something like that. So it depends very much on the topic. And so So for example, the reopening project fared really well on Facebook because it's a more down-to-earth kind of a thing that a lot of people could relate to, but an event on money laundering mostly fared well just on our website. So it depends on the topic and depends on the demographic. So what you can do learning from those analytics. I mean, we very democratically live stream everything on everywhere, right? So that people can choose. But in terms of promotion, we will maybe adapt more to to the different networks of what attracts people.
And have either of you found any platforms that, oh, I guess besides Slido, we had a client try to use Brella to sort of have little chats. I don't know if either of you have ever come across that, but there seems to be, there's software coming right and left and center at the moment to actually, and this actually goes out to all the attendees as well. If you've used something that you think is really good, that allows people to talk and engage with each other, because I think that is actually a key point of all of these things. Yes, it's about the speakers and having an amazing chair and providing an amazing experience for people to watch. But then the second part of that is also then how do you then foster that discussion together, which I suppose will be more relevant from some to the other. But if we had one bit of technology that did absolutely everything, that allowed you to broadcast, that allowed you to have your fancy name straps and transitions, that allowed people to engage with each other offline. Have you found any software that you've used for anything like that? Nothing.
No, not really. We've been on a hunt for that for a long time. And I think we did talk to Brella, but I don't remember when it was. I think at the time they didn't have anything that really worked for us. It is very true what Jasper said. It kind of feels like each of these products is doing their very specific thing, and you end up making kind of a collage out of all of them to produce the most lifelike product. But I don't know, I'm optimistic. I think the whole industry is going in a direction where, they'll start kind of adapting to events organizers' needs.
Yeah, and maybe somebody from this audience is going to go out there and start that company that's going to develop that app that can fill all these needs. So please, yes, very optimistic that this will exist at some point. To note too on your question on platforms, Johanna, our experience has been that it's not just about the numbers, it's about how long people are watching and who those people are, right? And so really engaging our core audiences on Zoom, we definitely, like Katja mentioned with some of their events, we get by all means the longest viewership on Zoom, and that's because those are our core audiences that we're focusing on. I would say that in terms of viewer time, that engagement time, it would be Zoom, YouTube, and then basically everything else. And that's just, I think, the nature of live streaming to social media. That being said, though, I think that it's worth distinguishing YouTube as sort of a different platform than the others in terms of your publication, because it functions differently than any other sort of social media network, in that it operates as a search engine rather than a social media network, which is trying to show you everything that's absolutely brand new, the latest stuff that's out there. And so we had one event that we hosted January of last year. It got several hundred viewers within the first couple weeks on YouTube, and then within a month, 2 months, it had 120,000 viewers, which is just sort of, it speaks to the fact that some of these events can live on YouTube in a way that they just won't with other live streaming platforms. I think the event in question was on state-owned oil companies, and that was exactly when the pandemic hit, and there were lots of questions about what was going to happen to energy markets, and thus a lot of people searching for what was going on in the energy sphere. So.
Well, that comes back to the whole thing about content, right? I mean, you can use any platform you like, but if your content isn't good, then people aren't going to watch. If your content is good, people will watch it no matter what. Go ahead.
Oh no, and it was all about optimizing that content after the fact to make it more available for people searching for it. So sort of a way to re-engage with our events after they'd happened, even months later.
So we've hit time. We're at 3 p.m. and I'm really happy to stay if you guys are able to stay, and attendees if you're able to stay. I actually have one further question, and that's really about looking to the future. I absolutely see how live events worked. I absolutely see how these online events have worked, and even the sort of first steps into hybrid, Jasper, that you've done, and Katja, where you have little bits of live elements, but then the majority is online. But looking forward to situations where, and I think this is going to happen to everybody, where we have maybe a studio or a conference center. We have maybe 100 people, 50, 100 people in the audience who are experiencing it in a live way. And then we have another couple of hundred that are experiencing it in an online way. And have either of you thought about this? Have your organizations thought about this? How are you going to make sure that the people who are there versus the people who are online are getting a similar experience or getting the most out of the event? Because I think that is where we are all going.
Well, we have started thinking about it because our annual meetings are upcoming. They take place in September. So last year, as I showed you some of the pictures, but they were mostly online. We only had a handful of speakers in person, but none of the audience. This year, we're going to attempt to kind of mix that up. And unfortunately, what I'm going to say is not going to apply for those small budget think tanks. I think it will boil down to purchasing a lot of screens and cameras, or at least renting them, so that we make everyone feel like they're there, and also people who are there, like they can talk to the people who are not there, because that has also been our concern. For example, if you, and I've watched like shows like this on TV, even where you, for example, have a chair and 2 or 3 panelists, and the 4th panelist is only joining by screen, and there are these 4 people sitting around a table, and then there's this awkward screen all the way there, and the 4 sitting at a table can easily interrupt each other, well, whereas the poor person on the screen is just waiting for somebody to unmute them. So we will try and basically work around that as much as possible, and kind of put together, like physically, visually close the people on the screen and the people sitting actually in the studio. And then again, it will be the burden on the shoulders of the chair will be to kind of moderate everybody's time and allow the screen person to interrupt.
Yeah, and honestly, I think there's no going back. The opportunities to have diverse voices from around the world are just too good now, and I think we can't really look back at how we've done our events in the past, because we want to bring in people from around the world. But yeah, to jump on Katja's point there, it's absolutely a case of the immense technical and visual challenges around doing all of this. We're really looking forward to the challenge, and we think we could do it. There are all sorts of audio sync issues, and yeah, like Katja said, people able to have that real conversation in the studio is going to be a real challenge when some people are appearing on screen. But that's exactly what we're having to think about right now, so we can bring those sort of hybrid events together on a stage.
Good. Well, we really, really look forward to that. So we're 3 minutes past time. I just want to call attention to, I've put a couple of links in the chat of interesting articles and videos about hybrid events. I put one film in there, which is a little odd. It was made by, I think it's like the Visit Estonia sort of department of the government. But Estonia was one of the countries that throughout the pandemic had these hybrid events where they had audience members and online members. And most of the video, by the way, you guys, is just promotional, so ignore it. But there's some really interesting little moments in there where you see how they've done it. And I think it's really interesting. So apologies for doing that. And I'm also just posting now some future things. I'm calling it future things, which are a little bit scary, maybe a little bit fun, maybe a little bit terrifying. Things that people are looking into that perhaps we might all be doing in a year from today, whereby we're having sort of 3D weird virtual reality conferences and things like that. It's just a bit of fun. So I just wanted to say thank you guys so much. Thank you, Katja. Thank you, Jasper, for coming. I know you're super, super busy, holding lots of events and doing lots of amazing things. And it was so great to hear from you today. I found it personally really interesting. And I think that all of the attendees have as well. We will be posting a video of this. At the moment, they're going on the WonkComms blog and on the Soapbox Vimeo, but we're just in the process of setting up the WonkComms YouTube again. So all of the WonkComms videos from the past year or so will be going on there. So this one, I'm sure that people will engage with after the fact, just like Jasper says. It was brilliant. Thank you, everyone. I'm so sorry if I haven't gotten around to your questions, but I think Katja, Jasper, you're happy for people to email you and ask questions, and it'll be brilliant. Good.
Thank you so much, Johanna, and thank you, Elena, too, the AV tech behind this call.
Thank you, Elena. Thank you so much. Yes, and let's keep the conversation going on Twitter, #WonkComms. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.